Are your ab exercises making you weaker? Welcome to part 3 of our 4 parts movement series with Jen Chestnut and myself. So today we're going to talk about, the positives of core training. What are some of the misconceptions and common things that we have seen in our many, many years of working with so many incredible people? And then also how you can start to make your core and abdominal exercises really work better for your body. So Jen, I'm excited to have you back on. We're going to chat today about ab exercises.
Thank you.
So let's start off by what are some of the positives that we see with, I hate to use the word abs. Guys, I really don't like the word ab training. It's just like, I don't ever use it. So I'm going to replace it with core training. And I want to preface this is that there are really can be some amazing positives with core training when it's done the right way. And that is the biggest caveat. And so I feel like in this conversation, we're going to talk about a lot of the common things that we've seen over the years that we see can lead to dysfunction, right, Jen? So
Yes.
so let's start with what's some of those, or no, hang on, sorry. Let's keep going with what are some of the positives of doing correct core training? Well, one of the big ones, right, is if we think about it, we have all of our intestines and organs, right, in or a lot of our intestines and a lot of organs in our abdominal cavity, right? Well, if we aren't strong enough through our abdominal wall, then our organs don't have enough support. And believe it or not, that can play a role in stagnation with digestion. Whole other conversation, but I always like to point it out. So that's one. Obviously, we want to have the right balance of strength through our abdominal wall, through our core to help, support our pelvis, support our spine, ribs. There's so many amazing positives to having a properly strengthened core, not just a strong core, because we can have too strong of abs and too strong of a core, which can lead to imbalance. So it's like we want to make sure with all core training we're doing, we want to be thinking about, what's the purpose behind these moves that we're doing? And are we feeling them in the right way? Right. So Jen, anything else positive that I missed you want to add on with correct core training? We'll make sure to clarify that.
I think a big one is injury prevention, especially with the back. If you have a good, strong core, you can protect your back a whole lot more because you don't have the other grippy muscles kicking in. A lot of people also don't realize is that with proper core training, you're going to have better breathing because you learn how to expand that rib cage space, your lung space, and how to properly use the breath to use and engage the core.
Good. I'm glad you mentioned breath because I was going to say it if you didn't. So let's lead right into injury prevention. Okay. So where do we start? We have a whole list, right, Jen? So the first thing that's coming to mind, because you were talking about, okay, a properly strengthened core can really help protect your low back. Absolutely. But if you're doing ab exercises ineffectively, they can actually make your back weaker. And so something that I'm picturing, because I know people that have injured their back doing this, is doing your traditional rounding the spine, just crunches, crunch after crunch after crunch, right? Where you're pulling on the hip flexors. The low back has a lot of pressure going into it. You're pressing, the pressure's going down on your pelvic floor. We're not able to really get good breath activation because we're just squeezing and pulling the belly to spine. And we're basically we check, I think, a lot of our what not to do things in a traditional crunch exercise. So that is one that, when it comes to crunches, and it's something where flexion, right? The movement of flexing up is a functional move. Like we do that, getting out of bed, getting up and down from the ground. So I don't want to negate that a crunch type motion isn't a functional motion. It can be. But what happens is so many fitness type stuff is doing these intense, I don't know, how many crunches, I'm trying to remember from old classes I used to take, how many crunches would you do in a workout class? 100 or something?
Oh, yeah.
Crazy
You would
or
start with
more?
20 minimum.
Yeah, like you do that like 5 times, or like, all sorts of variations of these really intense rounding your spine crunches. And the thing is, it might work when you're in your teens and your 20s, and but eventually it really leads to dysfunction because, like I mentioned, we're overusing your hip flexors. We are putting pressure in your low back, pressure on your pelvic floor. Many times we're drawing that belly to spine, and your breathing is really restricted. So, Jen, where do you want to start with all of those? Which one should we start with?
Well, I wanted to go with the grippy hip flexors, but I think a big thing to point out is, back when I used to work in the gyms, we always had those guys in there that they were there just to work their beach muscles, whatever you saw on the front. And a lot of people with their ab training or core training do the same thing. It's all that flexion front movement. Well, if you think about all these movements, you got to pull yourself back up. And so if we are flexing, we're completely weakening the whole backside, which sets our back up for injury, let alone with the already now overly tight, grippy hip flexors. Most people don't do enough of the extension movement or do it properly, where, if I say do a back extension, okay, what muscles are you working? People are going to be like, glutes, back. And I'll say, nope, this should be like one of the number one core movements. And they're going to say, huh? And I'll tell them, if you're doing it right, it's going to feel like you just did 100 sit-ups. It's that effective, but so many people leave out that extension because they feel like there's so less they can do, and it's such a small range of motion.
But when you do back extensions, I just taught some the other day on my Instagram because, I was on my Pilates Cadillac and I did like an extension. I hadn't done one up there in a while, but I do try to do some form of back extension every day. I recommend everybody do some form of back extension every day. Again, you need to learn how to do back extensions correctly, right? Because otherwise we tend to dump into our low back, and we should never feel back extensions dumping into your low back. But I did that, and it brought up a lot of questions about, oh my gosh, how can I do something like that at home without my, crazy Pilates, Cadillac. So I was like, okay, I'm going to teach a little bit more about a back extension. So I'll make sure I'll link that below. But here's the thing, when it comes to this is why I don't like the word abs, because our abs are really just most people think of it's just like the six-pack muscles, right? And then the obliques, right? So you got your rectus abdominals and you have your obliques. That's really what people look at as their abs. But that's such a small part of our core, right? And those of you that have listened to me talk about deep core, right? Deep core really is from the base of our pelvis, our pelvic floor, all the way up through our abdominal wall, along our sides, up our spine, the deep, deep layers underneath the rib cage, all those intercostal muscles up underneath the scapula. This is like everything in our torso. Okay. And our core includes all of the deep core. Plus we could think, sometimes we say core, we think more like the outer layer muscles. Like that's totally fine. So like Jen's saying, back extensions, when you do back extensions the correct way, you will feel your abs working in a lengthened position, right? So many times when people do back extensions, they just dump into their low back, like I was saying, right? So here's a key for everyone listening, watching today is if you can focus more on lengthening, and I know we'll get more into this as we talk about what to do, but some stuff just like to call out right away is because people dump into their back with extensions or just over flexing and going into the hip flexors, well, we're always crunching our body down and we're losing space. And if we're training our fascia to not have space, I'm going to tell you guys, like that's like one of the biggest reasons pain starts, because we lose space in our vertebrae. We lose space around our SI joints and through our hips, right? And so like Jen was saying, right, if our hip flexors are getting really tight and we don't have a balanced back line from our calves, hamstrings, glutes, back, mid back, all the way up, right? Then what happens is that can actually pull your hips forward. No one wants displaced hips. It's not fun. I've dealt with my share of hip stuff that I've actually suspected I was born with, right? And we can work with our body. But if we're specifically doing exercises that are restricting and causing tightening, and they can actually be pulling our bones into the wrong position, that's where we get some major pain, right? Think about that. If your hips, or even just one of your hips, maybe you're really dominant on one side, so that right hip is forward and the left one maybe is in the right spot, you're gonna get some major torquing and twisting in your pelvis, your SI joint, your low back, and then you wonder why your low back hurts. Okay, just I get on a roll. Sometimes I gotta slow myself down. Okay, so that's sorry, I kind of went down a rabbit hole on that, but I think that's just so important to understand that we have to remember everything is connected in the body. So for every, every crunch or intense abdominal exercise you're going to do, you need to balance that out with twice as many properly executed, back extensions. And now people think that's crazy, but I always say do twice as much back as you do front, because the back, you should be also using the front and vice versa. Okay, we'll get a little bit more into that, but let's go into the belly to spine. This is the next big key instruction cue that I think in my early days of training, I think I probably said it too, but I quickly realized, I don't like that cue. And I started teaching more of a zipping up and a lengthening. Remember, I was talking about lengthening just a second ago. So same with the belly to spine. And if you're listening right now or watching us, right, if you just think about just exhale and pull your belly to spine right now, see what happens. If you do that, like you're on video, you see my video, you see me go forward, you feel your body go forward, you possibly even feel pressure pushing down on your pelvic floor. You may even feel pressure in your low back, depending on how forceful you were with it, right? But it causes poor posture. It causes this rounding of the spine, putting pressure down. And those are things we want to minimize because those lead to dysfunction. We want to find that space and length. So we've got to really start to recognize we have to stop sucking the belly to spine. And I know a lot of you listening are like, well, but Erica, I've been doing that forever. That's what every single instructor has always told me to do. That's okay. Like, here's the deal. And this is what Jen and I love teaching all of you is that, just because we've done something one way forever doesn't mean that it's the best way for us now and for the future, right? When we learn new information, you can really empower your body with new knowledge. And then what it comes down to is we have to start being aware. So just start being aware when you're, starting to get grabby in your hip flexors or sucking your belly to spine. And you just have to tell your body, okay, we're practicing something new. We're starting to learn something new, and be patient with your body, be kind to your body, because these things take time to learn. But if we don't ever start trying, then, we're going to eventually lead into dysfunction, even if we don't have it yet. So, okay, Jen, do you want to take the next one with tucking of the pelvis?
Yeah. So there's a lot. It's funny. I hear it a lot when I'm on as a cue when I'm on the spin bike is they'll say, okay, you're standing up now, tuck that pelvis. Well, the minute we tuck the pelvis, a lot of people think, oh, it's my glutes that I'm working. Well, it's your hip flexors grabbing down, getting grippier. And especially if you sit all day, for long periods of time, driving in the car, whatever it is, you're just making them tighter and less able to lengthen and be like taffy and just kind of pull and mold. And with that tucking of the pelvis, we shut off our true deep core because you can't get a proper light pelvic floor connection and you can't properly get that deep core to work because now with that tucking, the obliques also kick in and the obliques will take over for everything.
And we love talking about grippy glutes and grippy obliques, grippy everything, grippy hip flexors. we just talk about grippy everything, right? Because that's where we have to start to calm down the grippiness and recognize where we've got these imbalances. Something else that comes along with a lot of a history of doing a lot of crunches is really restriction through the rib cage. And we teach a lot of ribcage work in core rehab because if we're locked in our rib cage, it leads to a lot of dysfunction. It's really can restrict a lot of breathing. And we know now, right, in order to have proper, effective deep core activation and strength, we have to be able to improve our breathing. So the rib cage is so incredible. And I love rib cage work. Like, I think rib cage work is some of the most magical because when we teach our ladies, it's like the first time they've ever even brought awareness to breathing into their rib cage. So something that I've noticed over the years, if someone has had a history of doing a lot of intense abdominal exercises, is the ribs will be dropped down into the body, right? Which then means they tend to be tighter in their upper back and their neck, right? So many times, and then if you're listening like, oh gosh, Erica, that's me. Yes. And so what we're doing is then we're always addressing what's going on with the traps in the neck, right? So you've got neck pain, then it's like, oh gosh, my neck hurts, my neck hurts. And so maybe you're going to a chiropractor, this or that, and doing whatever for your neck. But if we haven't actually addressed what's going on with the rib cage and really start to open up the rib cage, you're only going to get so far with your neck and your neck feeling better. So we have to work to open the rib cage. And I like the cue of like opening up across your sternum, or my clients like, I'll say like, pretend like a string is attached to your sternum and just like lift it straight up. And in the beginning, this is really hard for a lot of women to do. And so what it's going to do too, is going to help kick on your mid back muscles. Remember, we're talking about back work in conjunction with, opposite of doing crunches. And so the rib cage plays a huge role. This is where, if you've been listening to us the first, the previous two episodes as well, and starting to really understand, like, it's really truly all connected. We cannot just pinpoint one area of our body. If we've got pain in one area, okay, we can recognize and know we've got pain here, but rarely is that pain actually from that area of the body. Usually that pain is a response from somewhere else, right? So like the low back pain, for example, right? How many times it's like, oh gosh, we're going to keep doing these intense ab exercises because we think it's helping our back, because maybe initially the back pain seems to go away and maybe we're doing a bunch of stretches for our low back, but we're just making it weaker and weaker and weaker. Even if you get a little initial release because you maybe created a little space with the stretch, but you're not creating strength and space. And that is so huge. And if we think about, right, we've talked about like tucking to the pelvis, belly in, and the ribs down. So when we start to work on the opposite of those, and again, giving your body grace and making little tiny adjustments. Don't think like all these things are going to happen overnight, because they didn't happen to get grippy and tight overnight either. It's been years and years and years of really improper movement that's been taught. And again, it's no one's fault. It's just, that's kind of the way it is. We thought these things were good way back in the day. We now know they're not, but a lot of it's still being taught. We like to be on the front of the cutting edge of research, right, Jen?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so I wanted to also talk about diastasis recti here, because this is a big topic that comes up with our audience, our ladies, is that, right, diastasis recti, which again, it's not just from pregnancy. That's a common cause, right? Belly's got to stretch. So that's absolutely one reason. But men can get diastasis recti, honestly, from doing too much flexion, intense abdominal exercises, because they're getting really grippy in their obliques and they're not balanced through their core, the front, the back, the sides, and the fascial layers. This is a really big piece that we miss. We miss if we're only doing and always doing intense abdominal flexion exercises. Because if we're flexing like that, I've already went through a lot of the things, but we're not activating the fascial layers of our deep core and our core. And we have layers of fascia in our abdominal wall. So if you want a flatter belly, I can tell you that, I should say, flatter belly and better support for your organs and your spine, you have to learn how to tap into the fascial layers of your core, of your abdominal wall, of your spine, because that's actually what's going to help keep your belly flatter. Doing a bunch of crunches doesn't always keep your belly flatter, because if you look, I always use the example of like bodybuilders, for example. Go look at a bodybuilder. They have so much muscle, their belly actually protrudes out because they've been doing a ton of crunches instead of learning how to activate correctly through the abdominal wall to actually, I always feel like my fingers like using like this knitting feeling, right? Of like knitting like the fascial layers together and becoming stronger in a lengthened position, right? So with diastasis recti, right? Doing I always tell women, right, when you first get pregnant, please stop doing crunches. Like that is an absolute must, because they're not beneficial for you during pregnancy. They're more likely to cause diastasis, cause imbalances, cause back pain, all of that. So we instantly stop all of that. But here's the thing. You're always working your core when you learn how to activate with your breath. And we learn that core is involved in everything we do. So this whole notion of, gosh, we've got to go do this core workout. And don't get me wrong, I know I have quote core workouts too, but they're taught a little bit differently than what you see, or a lot different than what you see in traditional fitness, right? So it's like you think of like, oh, those 20-minute core exercises you go to at the gym, or 6-minute abs, or whatever, right? And it's like we have to get out of this notion of like just working our core and then we go do arms and legs. It's like, oh no. When you're working your legs and you're working your arms, you best be working your deep core too. Or core, however you want to look at it, right? It's always active, right? When you're working out, or should be. And if it's not, well, you come to the right place because we will help teach you. So with diastasis recti, I started on pregnancy. I got off. We'll come back. So with pregnancy, right, a lot of it we're really working, and I always say pregnancy is the best time for women to learn how to effectively strengthen their pelvic floor, their deep core. Spend so much time working on releasing and relaxing, and we do so much fascial work during pregnancy. And I've learned so much from all the prenatal training that I've done in my 20 years. It's been absolutely amazing to see what is possible with the pregnant body. It's like, it's really magical to me. And we don't talk enough about how amazing it is, right? And it's not just about keeping your abs strong during pregnancy. It's really kind of the opposite. It's right, keeping your whole body strong, and the right kind of strong to prepare the body for the rest of pregnancy, for birth. Yes, what you do during pregnancy and your core training can have a positive or potentially negative effect on how birth goes as well. Because if we're too tight, ladies, in our obliques and our pelvic floor, that could have make the pushing stage of labor a little bit harder, which then ultimately can make postpartum recovery harder. So what we see is when you learn how to effectively strengthen your core during pregnancy, it can have a better outcome on birth as well as postpartum recovery. And then we have to remember in that postpartum stage, we can't just go right back to doing our pre-baby exercises because of relaxin in the body. We've got to let the body heal. We've got to train it from the inside out. And that's where I think so many times we think, oh gosh, we want results yesterday. And that's where we can tend to see quicker results when you go to the weights and doing the higher intensity stuff for your core. But ultimately, ladies, that actually can cause diastasis recti even if you didn't have it, because you weren't healed enough postpartum. And so we have to be really smart with our training when all these changes are taking place. Now, for those of you that are either way beyond babies or haven't had babies yet, or maybe even a man listening, right? So with diastasis, it comes to, if you have it, in order to heal it, please stop doing crunches. I know that's taught, and I say that's a myth. And maybe there are people out there that have been able to heal their diastasis by doing crunches and things. That's fine. I have not found that to be effective. Right, Jen?
Right.
And so we have to think of, when it comes to healing diastasis, we're healing the body from the inside out. Everything we're doing, it's really from the inside out. And that's why we get such good results, right? But we have to change our thinking. And we have to get out of our own way sometimes, of okay, we got to back off on the core training we're doing and learn to work our core in a different way. And when you do, the amazing thing is especially when we're talking like diastasis recti, the cool thing I love is that there's so many other amazing results that come out of it for our clients, right? Because they're learning so much more than just how to heal their abs. And I will tell you, ladies, if you have diastasis and you're here just to heal your abs, you have to address your pelvic floor function. I've heard that so many times. We get emails, right, Jen, of women that are like, okay, I just want to heal my diastasis. I don't want to learn anything else from you. All I care about is healing my diastasis. And I'm like, okay, well, hold your horses there, because you do need to learn everything else, because posture plays a role. We already mentioned everything we've already mentioned plays a role in prevention and healing of diastasis recti as well. Okay. Anything else with that? Jen, you want to add?
I think a big thing to go with, because you brought up how we have those women who are like, I just want to heal this. I just want to do this. I don't want to do anything extra. Well, we have to get rid of all that dysfunction. We've got to get rid of all the grippiness. We've got to get rid of all the compensatory motions. And so in order to do that, I don't care if you've been doing core work for 30 years, we've got to strip you straight back to the bottom. You can't pour concrete in a wall that doesn't have like the rebar and everything set up for it. The concrete's just going to come right out. We have to build that rebar from the inside, like you were saying, out to make it stronger so that you don't have these problems. And then you could go back and do your crunches, but you're going to realize you're doing them completely different and they are so much more effective.
Yes, so well said. Okay, so I think we've already like said a lot of tips, but let's recap them for everybody because a lot of information we kind of threw out. So there are so many things that we can do to really make your core and ab exercises so much more effective for your body now and in the long term. Jen kind of said a good overview of like, we're starting from the inside out. So we have to remember that, right? Because sometimes, again, we want those results yesterday. We have to remember we didn't get into dysfunction overnight. So we have to be patient with our body getting out of dysfunction. And anyway, okay, I was going to say something, but I was like, nope, stay on track. Stay on track. Okay, so let's recap. One of my biggest things is if you can focus on always lengthening through your body, that on its own, good for your posture, better for your core. When you start to bring more awareness just to how you're holding your body, that's huge. That is absolutely huge. And that on its own can help to start making your deep layers of your core more stronger in the more effective way. Jen, I'll let you take a next one.
Well, I think another one for people to understand is they have to see the anatomy and the fascia. And your true deep core is made up of 3 fascial layers that come from the tip of your head all the way down to your toes. So stop looking at the little picture of doing crunches and just focusing on move those abs when most of the time you're doing your hip flexors, but that's a whole other story. See the big picture. Make your core work through every movement you're doing. Big picture movements, squats, they're turned on. Rotations, it's turned on and working.
Yeah, absolutely. That core should be lightly working in every sort of movement you're doing, because that's what's giving your body the support it needs. Like, you've got to remember, well, why were we even thinking about doing ab exercises in the first place? Besides potentially maybe wanting a 6-pack. I don't know. I've moved past that.
That's a genetics thing.
Is that a genetics thing? I'm like, I want support for my body. I want to feel good and I want to be able to move without pain. Right. I feel like so many people listening hopefully are thinking along those same lines too. So one of the other ones is breathing, right? Bringing more awareness to your breath. So even right now, just paying attention to, if you just, whatever you're doing, even if you're driving, just kind of like, how are you breathing? Where does your breath go? Do you feel your breath be able to go down into your ribs? Or do you notice that you're stuck right up in your chest and your shoulders raised to your ears when you breathe in, right? Again, don't be hard on yourself. If you notice that your breath goes up and you're like, oh, there's no breath down into those ribs, that's okay. Like, start with where you are today. Like, that awareness is that first piece. But as you can, start to work that breath slowly down into the ribs, into your back, down into your belly, all the way down into your pelvis. And this is why I love the small balls that we have. This has been so helpful in helping our students to open up the ribs and open up the breath, right? And because it's partly it's a visual thing for the brain to know, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be breathing. So it's a lot of brain training that you're really doing through all of this, because we just have to work on new habits and new better habits for moving our body. Jen.
Let me give the last one.
Sure.
Okay, my last one is back extension. Extend, 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 but properly. You can totally hurt your back if you're not using the lengthening component, but your back extension should come and radiate from that deep core, and it will become like a completely different exercise for you.
Yes, do back extensions every day, but do them correctly. I'll put a link below, watch my video, learn how to do them effectively and right. And it will just can literally change your life. I mean, I know that's a big statement, but this stuff can, because when you feel better, you can just accomplish so much more and you're less tired and all that. So ladies, I want to send you all, if you don't have access to my free pelvic floor guide yet, you're going to want to grab that. It's so educational, and I'm all about empowering each and every one of you to learn more about your body, learn more about your core, your pelvic floor. So you can grab that on my website. It's ericazeal.com/pelvic floor. And I also, since we talked about diastasis recti today, I got to throw that in here too. So I do also have a diastasis recti guide. We get a lot of questions. I love the diastasis conversation because there's so much healing that we can do with diastasis. I know we get a lot of women that are like, Erica, I've been told I have to have surgery to heal my diastasis. Well, you do not. We have helped, I don't even know how many women to date to heal diastasis. So you can grab that guide. It's just ericazeal.com/DR. And again, I'll put all those links below if you're watching on YouTube or if you're listening to the podcast episode. All those links will be below. And of course, as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to reply to any of the emails you get. It'll either be Jen or myself that answers them, or you can always reach out to me on Instagram at Erica Zeal. Thanks for joining us today. And we look forward to having you back for part 4 of our 4-part movement series. Bye, guys.
Bye.